Welcome to the Behind Story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a crazy story. Let's jump right in. I had just stepped back outside, still dripping from my quick dip in the pool, when I saw her. A woman, maybe in her mid-40s, lounged on my poolside chair as if she owned the place. My hat and sunscreen, which had been neatly placed there earlier, were now scattered on the ground. The audacity of it made me freeze in my tracks for a moment, my brain struggling to process the sheer entitlement unfolding in front of me. And then there was the kid. A small, shrieking blur of motion splashed in my pool, utterly oblivious to the fact that he was swimming in my water, in my backyard, without permission. I took a step forward, my wet feet slapping against the pavement. Excuse me, why are you on my property? The woman, still perfectly at ease in my chair, looked up at me with a feigned expression of surprise, as if I were the intruder here. "Oh, is this your property?" she asked, her voice dripping with exaggerated innocence. Was this woman serious? "Yes, this is my house, my yard, my pool." I gestured around us, my frustration already bubbling over. "So I'll ask again, why are you here?" she sighed, the kind of long-suffering exhale one might use when dealing with a particularly slow-witted child. "Well, you see, my son wanted to go for a swim, but the lake was too cold. Isn't that right, sweetie?" The kid, still splashing happily, paid her no mind. I blinked, momentarily too stunned to speak. This woman, a complete stranger, had invited herself and her child onto my property, using my pool like some kind of public facility, because the lake, the actual public body of water just a short walk away, was too cold for their liking. I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Right, but that still doesn't explain why you thought it was okay to just waltz into someone else's yard and make yourself comfortable." Her expression shifted, the faux innocence fading. "Well, you weren't out here, and it's just a pool. Relax. Relax? Relax." This woman was trespassing, letting her child run wild in my backyard, and now had the gall to tell me to relax? I took a deep breath, forcing down the sudden urge to dump a bucket of pool water over her smugly entitled face. Instead, I turned toward the kid. "Hey buddy, time to get out. You're swimming in a private pool. Bad move." The woman shot up from the chair, as if I had just personally insulted the honor of her entire bloodline. "How dare you speak to my child like that?" she shrieked, stepping into my space, her face a mask of exaggerated outrage. "He has feelings, you know. He deserves to be in that pool. And now you want to rip him away? What kind of heartless person are you?" "Oh, you have got to be kidding me." I pinched the bridge of my nose, inhaling deeply before responding. "Lady, I don't care how cold the lake is. This is my property. You and your kid need to leave. Now," she scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "Or what? You gonna call the cops over a kid swimming? Do you really want to traumatize a child like that?" I stared at her, utterly incredulous. "Traumatize? Are you joking? You trespassed onto my property, took over my things, and now you're trying to guilt-trip me into letting you stay." She tossed her hair back, clearly doubling down. "It's called being neighborly, something you clearly don't understand. What happened to being a good person?" I clenched my jaw. "Being a good person doesn't mean letting strangers walk all over you. Now get off my property before I actually call the cops." Her eyes widened in mock horror, and then I kid you not, she actually laughed. "Go ahead, call them. I'll just tell them you threatened me and my child. Let's see who they believe." For a moment, I simply stared at her, my brain short-circuiting at the sheer weaponized entitlement on display. Was she seriously threatening to lie to the cops to get her way? Something inside me snapped. "Okay, let's test that theory." I pulled out my phone and started dialing. 911. "Oh my God. Fine," she shrieked, snatching up her bag in a huff. "Come on, sweetie. We're leaving because this man doesn't know how to share." The kid, finally realizing the fun was over, pouted but climbed out of the pool. She grabbed his hand and dramatically stomped toward the gate, her righteous fury burning hot. But she couldn't resist one last parting shot. As she reached the edge of my yard, she whirled around and jabbed a finger at me. "You're a horrible person. I hope you realize that. Selfish people like you ruin communities." And with that, she flipped me off and stormed away. I stood there for a long moment, watching her go, still trying to process what had just happened. Then finally I exhaled, shaking my head. I needed to install security cameras. Immediately. I thought that was the end of it. I hoped that was the end of it. But deep down, I should have known better. Because when a Karen feels slighted, it doesn't end with a dramatic exit and a middle finger no. That's just the beginning. The next morning, I stepped out onto my back porch, a fresh cup of coffee in hand, and there she was, Karen, standing right outside my fence, arms crossed, eyes locked on me like a predator sizing up its next meal. I hadn't even had my first sip of caffeine yet, and already my patience was running on fumes. I sighed. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." She smiled, actually smiled, like we were old friends meeting up for brunch instead of two people who had barely avoided a police call the night before. "Good morning," she chirped, her tone dangerously sweet. I stared at her, waiting for the catch. She didn't wait long to deliver it. "I was thinking about our little misunderstanding yesterday, and I realized maybe you just didn't realize who I was." "Oh no, here we go." "Uh-huh," I grunted, taking a sip of coffee. "Pretty sure I got the picture loud and clear. You trespassed. You got caught. You threw a tantrum. End of story." Her smile didn't falter. If anything, it widened. "Oh, no, no, you don't understand." She let out a light laugh, like I was just a silly little man who needed everything explained to him. "See, I'm actually on the HOA board for this neighborhood." I nearly choked on my coffee. "The what now?" I sputtered, wiping my mouth. Her grin was positively predatory now. "Yes, that's right. And, well, as you know, our HOA has certain expectations for community spaces." I blinked at her. "Community spaces? This is my backyard." She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, technicalities. The thing is, my son was really looking forward to swimming again today. And, well, since our community doesn't have a pool, it would just be so neighborly of you to let us use yours. I mean, think of the children." I stared at her, trying to decide if she was joking. She wasn't. This woman was seriously standing outside my fence, demanding that I open my private pool to the entire neighborhood because she had somehow convinced herself that my property was now community property. I exhaled slowly, setting my coffee down on the railing before I did something I'd regret. Not happening. Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me? You heard me. Not happening. You don't get to waltz in here, declare my property part of the neighborhood, and act like I'm the one being unreasonable. My yard, my pool, my rules. You want a community pool? Start a fundraiser." Her expression twisted into something ugly. "I was hoping we could handle this amicably. But if you insist on being selfish, I let out a sharp laugh. Oh, that's rich, coming from the woman who literally threatened to call the cops on me for telling her kid to get out of my pool. She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Well, if that's how you're going to be, then I guess I have no choice but to file a formal complaint with the HOA. I arched a brow. "For what? Not letting you steal my pool?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "For violating community aesthetics." I almost laughed. Almost. Then I saw the glint in her eye, the smug certainty that she had me trapped, that she thought she had power here. "Oh, hell no." I leaned on the railing, giving her the same slow, infuriating smile she'd given me earlier. "All right, Karen, go ahead. File your complaint. But before you do, maybe you should take a little walk around the neighborhood." She frowned. "What?" "You know, just a nice stroll. Maybe take a look at the actual violations going on. Like, say, Miss S. Henderson's illegal shed addition? Or the miller's unapproved fence extension? Or oh, how about the fact that Greg, your precious HOA enforcer, has 3 unregistered vehicles parked in his driveway? Her face paled. That's not the same thing. No, because I happen to have pictures of all of them. I smirked. You know, just in case I ever needed to file some complaints of my own. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. But no words came out. I crossed my arms. What's wrong, Karen? Thought you had all the power? Guess what? So do I. And unlike you, I don't need to make up fake rules to win. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. This isn't over, I grinned. Oh, I know. She spun on her heel and stomped away, her anger practically radiating off her like heat from asphalt in mid-July. I waited until she was out of sight before picking up my coffee again, taking a slow, satisfying sip. This wasn't over, all right. It was just getting started. I barely had time to enjoy the victory before the retaliation began. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of banging on my front door. Not knocking, banging, like someone was trying to break the damn thing down. I groggily stumbled out of bed, grabbed the nearest shirt I could find, and stomped to the door. The moment I yanked it open, I was greeted by the absolute last face I wanted to see at this hour. Karen. And she wasn't alone. Behind her stood Greg Whitmore, the walking, talking HOA rulebook himself, clipboard in hand, looking like he had just been waiting for this moment. I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face. Let me guess. Another friendly neighborhood visit? Karen's arms were crossed so tightly, it looked like she was trying to keep her rage from spilling out all over my porch. Mr. Calloway, she said, voice dripping with manufactured politeness. It has come to our attention that your property has accumulated multiple violations in recent weeks. I blinked. Excuse me? Greg, clearly buzzing with excitement, flipped through his clipboard. Your lawn exceeds the permitted blade length by approximately 1.5 inches. Your mailbox is not HOA regulation approved. And, most concerningly, he adjusted his glasses for dramatic effect. Your pool is operating without an HOA safety permit. I stared at them. Then I laughed. Karen's face turned an impressive shade of red. This is not a joke. Oh no, it's hilarious, I said, wiping at my eyes. I reject your stupid HOA rules, refuse to let you turn my backyard into a public pool, and now suddenly my property is riddled with violations? Greg cleared his throat, trying and failing to look official. These rules exist for the betterment of the community. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, so the betterment of the community didn't apply until I told Karen no? Karen's lips pressed into a tight line. You don't get to pick and choose which rules to follow, Mr. Calloway. Oh, that's rich coming from you. I leaned against my door frame, arms crossed, because as far as I remember, trespassing and attempting to extort access to someone's private pool isn't in the HOA guidelines either. Yet here we are. Greg shifted uncomfortably. Karen, however, doubled down. We are issuing you a formal warning. If these violations are not addressed within 1 week, you will be fined accordingly. And if you fail to comply, her eyes gleamed, we will be forced to take legal action. Legal action. Over grass height and a mailbox. I exhaled slowly. You know what? I said, pushing off the doorframe. Go ahead. Find me. Call your lawyers. Do your worst. But just remember, I have a lot more on this neighborhood than you think. And I have 0 issues bringing all those little secret violations to the attention of the actual city inspectors. Greg paled. Karen's eye twitched. But neither of them backed down. You'll regret this, she hissed. I smirked. Funny, that's exactly what I was about to say. Then I slammed the door in their faces. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I knew Karen wasn't the type to back off. She was plotting something. And sure enough, 3 days later, I walked outside to find a notice stuck to my front door. A bright red slip of paper with one simple message: mandatory HOA meeting, subject, property dispute, attendance required. I sighed, running a hand down my face. Here we go. I had no doubt that this was Karen's latest power move, and, despite every instinct in my body telling me to ignore it completely, I knew that wasn't an option. No, if Karen wanted a war, I was going to make damn sure she regretted starting it. The meeting was held at the HOA's preciously maintained clubhouse, a building that looked far too expensive for an organization that spent its time micromanaging people's mailbox colors. When I walked in, all eyes turned to me. Karen stood at the front, smug as ever. Greg was seated beside her, flipping through his precious clipboard. Several other HOA members sat in the front row, most of them the power-hungry, busybody types who thrived on rules for the sake of rules. I took a seat near the back, stretching out like I owned the place, because if this was going to be a show, I was damn well going to enjoy it. Karen cleared her throat dramatically. This meeting has been called to address the repeated violations of Mr. Calloway and to determine a course of action moving forward. I yawned. She bristled. Mr. Calloway, do you have anything to say for yourself? I smirked. Yeah. Where's the popcorn? A few members actually chuckled. Karen shot them a deadly glare before turning back to me. You have consistently disregarded HOA regulations, failed to comply with community standards, and hold up. I held up a hand. I'm not an HOA member. I've never signed anything. My property was here before this dictatorship even formed. So tell me, how exactly do your rules apply to me? A beat of silence. Greg shifted in his seat. Some of the other members glanced at each other. Karen, however, plowed ahead. That is irrelevant, she snapped. You live in this community. Therefore, you are subject to its regulations. I tilted my head. So if I decided to slap a fine on you for your illegal hedge extensions, you'd be totally cool with that? Her eye twitched. That's... And Greg, I continued, turning to the clipboard warrior himself. Pretty sure HOA guidelines don't allow 3 unregistered vehicles rotting in your driveway. Greg went stiff. I leaned back in my chair. So remind me again, who exactly is violating community standards here? The room was dead silent. Karen's face had gone pale. Greg looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole. And me? I just smiled. Because I had just won. The silence stretched long and thick, swallowing the room whole. Karen sat stiff as a board, her lips pressed so tightly together. I thought they might fuse shut. Greg looked like he had just swallowed a live grenade and was waiting to explode. The rest of the HOA board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, suddenly very aware that the tables had turned. I let the silence hang there for a moment, enjoying the tension like the first sip of a cold beer on a hot summer day. Then I leaned forward, steepling my fingers as I spoke. So, now that we've established that some of you are just as guilty of violations as I supposedly am, what exactly do you plan to do about it? Karen was the first to recover. Of course, she was. She squared her shoulders and jutted her chin up like a queen, preparing to smite a peasant. Mr. Calloway, this meeting is about your violations, not mine. Oh, see, that's where you're wrong, I said, pulling a thick manila folder from my bag. I placed it on the table with a satisfying thud, because I did a little digging of my own. Turns out, the HOA's own bylaws state that all board members must be in full compliance with HOA regulations in order to enforce them on others. And, well, I smirked. You and Greg here? You're not exactly shining examples of compliance, are you? Karen's face twitched. Greg shifted even more in his chair, suddenly finding his clipboard very interesting. One of the board members, a man named Russell, who I was starting to think had half a brain, cleared his throat. Wait, is that actually in the bylaws? I tapped the folder. Page 6, paragraph 4, subsection B. Russell leaned over, snatching the folder and flipping through the pages. His eyes widened as he read. Karen, Seeing her grip on the situation slipping, went into full damage control mode. This is ridiculous. Those are minor infractions, hardly comparable to someone blatantly disregarding the rules and creating a public nuisance. I arched an eyebrow. A public nuisance? Because I refuse to turn my private pool into a free-for-all splash zone for you and your kid? Her jaw clenched. It's about community values. We are all part of a neighborhood. Mr. Calloway, we should be looking out for one another. Karen, you trespassed onto my property. It wasn't trespassing, it was. You climbed over my fence. Her face flushed a deep red, but she recovered quickly. Well, if you weren't so selfish with your resources, maybe people wouldn't have to go to such measures. I let out a sharp laugh. So your logic is, if someone has something you want, and they say no, you're justified in taking it. She crossed her arms. If it benefits the community, yes. Okay, cool. In that case, I assume you won't mind me helping myself to your backyard whenever I feel like it? Maybe I'll host a neighborhood barbecue. Oh, or better yet, I'll put in a second pool. Community access, of course. You wouldn't want to be selfish, right? Karen sputtered. That's completely different. Oh, is it? I tilted my head. Explain how. She opened her mouth. Shut it. Opened it again. Nothing. The room went silent again, and I could see the realization finally sinking in for the other board members. Karen had overplayed her hand, and now she was out of moves. Greg, perhaps realizing that he had tied himself to a sinking ship, cleared his throat. I think maybe we should, table this for now. Karen's head whipped toward him so fast, I thought she might get whiplash. Excuse me. Greg adjusted his tie, avoiding eye contact. I mean, we have more pressing issues, right? Like, the blocked fire hydrants and unregistered vehicles. Karen was seething. But the rest of the board? They looked relieved. Russell let out a breath, nodding. Yeah, maybe we should focus on actual violations instead of whatever this is. Karen shot up from her chair. You're all spineless. She jabbed a finger at me. This isn't over, I grinned. No, it kind of feels like it is. She stormed out. Greg, looking utterly defeated, trailed after her. The remaining board members exchanged looks before Russell finally sighed. Well, that was a mess. You think? I said, leaning back. Now, how about we talk about getting those real violations sorted? By the time I got home, I could already feel the shift in the neighborhood. Karen had lost her iron grip, and people knew it. No more HOA patrols lingering by mailboxes. No more pointless citations for grass height violations. It was like the entire street had let out a collective breath. And me? I was finally free of HOA nonsense. Or so I thought. That night, my security cameras picked up movement in my backyard. I checked the feed and felt my blood boil. It was Karen. And she wasn't alone. She and her equally entitled son were sneaking back into my yard. The kid ran straight for the pool, while Karen stood watch, arms crossed like she was daring me to do something about it. I took a slow breath. Okay, Karen, you want a war? Let's finish it. The moment I saw Karen and her brat sneaking into my yard on the security feed, I felt my pulse spike. She wasn't just bold. She was certifiably insane. My fingers clenched around my phone as I watched her son run straight for the pool, cannonballing into the water like he belonged there. Meanwhile, Karen stood near the fence, arms crossed, staring right at my security camera, with a smug look that practically dared me to come outside. Oh, I was coming outside, all right. I stepped onto the back porch, phone in one hand, garden hose in the other. Get out of my pool. The words came out sharper than broken glass, slicing through the humid night air. Karen, unsurprisingly, didn't flinch. If anything, her grin widened. Oh, Mr. Calloway. Fancy seeing you here. What a lovely night for a swim, don't you think? Her kid splashed around like a hyperactive dolphin, completely ignoring me. I tightened my grip on the hose. You have exactly 5 seconds to get him out before I turn this on full blast." Karen gasped like I had just threatened to burn her house down. "Are you serious? You would assault a child? You mean the trespasser currently contaminating my pool?" "Yeah, Karen. I would absolutely hose him down like the unwanted raccoon he is." Her eyes widened in shock, but it wasn't fear. No, this woman didn't experience normal human emotions. It was indignation. "How dare you? He's just a child. What kind of heartless person attacks a child?" "The kind that doesn't tolerate entitled lunatics, using his backyard as a free water park." And then, with absolutely no shame, she whipped out her phone. I nearly laughed. "Oh, what now? You calling the cops to report yourself for trespassing?" She smirked. "No, I'm live streaming." "Oh, for the love of—" I heard the artificial bolding as her phone went live. "Ladies and gentlemen, look at this grown man threatening a poor innocent child, all because we wanted to go for a little swim. This is what's wrong with the world today." I saw red. Oh, she wanted a show? Fine. She was about to get one. I cranked the hose to full power and sprayed a direct, high-pressure blast right at her kid. He shrieked like a banshee and scrambled out of the pool, slipping and flailing like a fish out of water. Karen's live streaming hand jerked, and the camera tilted wildly as she screamed, "You monster!" I adjusted my aim and drenched her next. Her phone short-circuited instantly, the live stream cutting off with a pitiful bzz. Karen stood there, soaked, her hair plastered to her face, her expensive blouse clinging to her in the most unflattering way possible. I had never seen someone vibrate with rage before, but Karen was actively pulsating. "How dare you?" she shrieked, voice cracking. "I will have you arrested for assault." I smirked, pointing at my security camera. "Oh, you mean that one? The one recording you trespassing? The one recording your kid breaking into my pool? By all means, Karen, call the cops. Let's see who gets arrested first." For the first time ever, I saw something flicker behind Karen's eyes. Doubt. It was glorious. She turned to her son, now dripping wet and miserable. "Come on, sweetie. We're leaving. This place is disgusting anyway." I called after her, funny. "You didn't seem to think so when you tried to claim it as public property." She stormed off, dragging her waterlogged gremlin behind her, soaked, humiliated, and defeated. But I knew Karen. She wasn't done. Sure enough, the next morning, I woke up to something way worse than her screaming. A letter. A legal letter. From a lawyer. I unfolded it slowly, already feeling the impending migraine forming. "Dear Mr. Calloway, our client, Miss S., Karen Whitmore, has retained our firm to seek damages for the traumatic emotional distress suffered by both her and her child due to your unprovoked attack. We demand the following. 1. A formal apology issued publicly. 2. A financial settlement of $10,000 for damages and therapy costs. 3. A written agreement granting supervised pool access to her child for the remainder of the summer. If these demands are not met within 72 hours, we will be filing a lawsuit against you. Sincerely, Johnson and Maxwell Legal Associates." I stared at the paper. Then I laughed. I pulled out my phone and dialed my lawyer. "Hey, Dave. Yeah, I need you to take a look at something. It seems like someone wants to go to war, because if Karen wanted to drag me into court, I was going to make sure she walked away with nothing but regret." I sat there, staring at the legal letter in my hands, the absurdity of it all washing over me like a rogue wave. Karen, that absolute lunatic, had actually hired a lawyer. For what? Because I stopped her and her kid from illegally using my pool? Because I had the audacity to spray a trespasser with a garden hose? And now, she wanted me to publicly apologize, hand over 10 grand, and oh, the best part, grant her kid supervised access to my pool for the rest of the summer. I let out a slow, disbelieving chuckle. She thought she had me cornered. Oh, Karen, you really should have picked someone else. I pulled out my phone and hit speed dial. Dave, my lawyer, picked up on the second ring. This better be good. Karen's suing me. A beat of silence. Then, uproarious laughter. Oh, God, Dave wheezed. Tell me you're joking. I wish, I said, scanning the letter again. Apparently, she suffered emotional distress when I had the gall to defend my own property, Dave snorted. And let me guess she conveniently forgot that she and her gremlin were the ones trespassing? Bingo. He sighed. Send me the letter and the security footage. Already on it. The next day, I got a call. Good news, Dave said, amusement thick in his voice. Karen's lawyer just dropped her case. I blinked. Wait, what? Already? Yep. Turns out, the guy didn't know the full story before taking her on as a client. He saw your security footage, realized he was about to get laughed out of a courtroom, and bailed faster than Karen at a charity event that doesn't involve wine and complaining. I grinned. Well, that was easy. Oh, don't get too comfortable, Dave warned. Karen's not the type to accept a loss gracefully. I sighed. I figured. But she can't exactly force me to let her kids swim in my pool. No, but she can and will make your life hell. Stay sharp. 2 days later, the retaliation began. It started small. A pile of HOA violation notices appeared in my mailbox, stacked thick, grass height, fence color, mailbox placement, failure to uphold community standards. Then came the anonymous complaints. A call from animal control claiming I had a dangerously aggressive dog. I don't even own a dog. A city inspector showing up about a disturbing noise. Complaint that didn't exist. Each time, I calmly provided evidence that it was all bogus, but I knew exactly who was behind it, so I waited. And finally, Karen snapped. I was in my backyard, enjoying my pool alone like a normal person who owns their property, when I heard her screech. This is harassment. I turned. There she was, standing at my fence, phone out, recording me. Oh, for the love of... You are discriminating against my child, she bellowed. You're a child-hating monster. I blinked. Karen, you broke into my yard. Again. ITS for the community. It's private property, you lunatic. She stomped her foot like a petulant toddler. I will have you arrested. I smiled, pulled out my phone, and tapped my security app. Smile for the police, Karen. They're already on their way. The color drained from her face. She looked from me to my phone to the cameras mounted along my fence. She had finally realized she had screwed up. I leaned forward. This time, Karen, you're the one getting fined. And for the first time since this insane war started, Karen shut up because she knew she had lost.